Hi ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters. My name is William Hwang. I live in San Diego, California, United States, and today is April 4th, 2020. My topic this afternoon will be COVID-19 and the sovereignty of God. As you know that the pandemic is still raging around the world, and a lot of people have experiences deaths in their families, and have experiences sickness themselves, or they are engulfed in fear whether they are going to be caught up by the infections. But for sure their lives have been completely upended. Some have lost jobs, some has cut down on their work hours, and there has been tremendous readjustments in their lives that they do not feel comfortable with. And the questions in their hearts are this: where is God in the midst of this pandemic? Is God in control? Or in other words, is God sovereign? So we are going to deal with those questions today. But as we know that the United States had become the number one in the world on March 26 in the infection rate with 82,400, and the deaths of 4,010 on the March 31st, surpassing China. Based upon the modeling, it is estimated with full mitigation that the deaths in America would be up to 240,000 people. As of right now, 1.2 million people had been infected, 65,000 people had died, and in US alone, 310,000 people had been infected, with 8,750 had died. Let's define sovereignty of God. Sovereignty is the full authority and power of God to do or allow whatever He decrees. That means that He could do whatever He wants or He decrees. As we look at Daniel chapter 4:17, it says that this matter is by decree of the watchers and the demand of the word of the holy ones, to the extent that the living may know that the Most High rule in the kingdom of man and give it to whomever He will, and set up over it the basis of man. God is control of human history. He is sovereign. In His sovereignty, He sets up the economy of the redemptive historical narrative. There are 7 C's that I want to briefly talk about. That it starts with the creation of God. That was in the Genesis. And in the same book of Genesis, we come into the 2nd C, which is the corruption. The corruption of the angels that became Satan and the demons, and then the corruption of man in the fall of Adam and Eve. And then the 3rd C was in the condemnation of the flood in Noah's time, that the whole world was flooded, and only Noah and his family survived. And the 4th was the confusion at the Tower of Babel, when the people rise up against God, and God confused their language and spread them around the world. So these are the 4 major events in the Old Testament, specifically in Genesis. And there are 3 more in the New Testament that is of tremendous importance. And that's the number 5 will be the crucifixion. There's the redemption of humanity, the Jesus Christ died on the cross to pay for the sins of the world, and the sinful people could be forgiven of their sins and to be reconciled with God. And that's number 6 would be in the church. The C would be the church, that Christ is embodied in the living people who accepted him in their hearts and are living according to his teachings and are behaving to be like him. And that's the church, and that's where the scriptures are taught, and that's where the Christ is modeled, and that's the kindness and the attributes of Jesus Christ is being displayed. And then we come to the revelation. C is the consummation of the age, that there will be a new heaven and new earth, and there's a new Jerusalem. So these are the 7 C's in the history of the entire humanity and the universe throughout the ages. It starts from the beginning in the genesis of creation and the consummation in Revelations. And this is God's sovereignty, that he is sovereign to establish this economy. Now, God is also sovereign in his setting of nations and kings. As we read earlier in Daniel 4, and also in Proverbs 21:1, that says that the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, as the rivers of water, he turn it whithersoever he will. God is also sovereign in the natural world and the ecosystems, that he sets up ways that systems work in the universe. He set up the natural laws, he set up the laws of physics. The laws of gravity is probably the one that all of us are very familiar. He set it up so that all the planets could revolve in an orderly manner, and that will go on for a long time. The ecosystems of how our body would function, that we have to eat, and it turns into the energy that allows us to function. So all these are the natural world and ecosystems are by the decree of a sovereign God. God sets the laws of nature, the laws of gravity and others I mentioned. However, there is one that is of special interest to me as we discuss these questions, is the law of entropy. That when God sets the commandments for Adam and Eve not to eat the fruit of knowledge and of the evil, good and evil, and the penalty was death. The humanity was condemned to die, and there's no exception to it. Every single person who live on this world will die. It's not a chance, it's a certainty. Now, God also in his sovereignty created in the spiritual realm of heaven of angels, and the angels that later on turned into Satan and his devils. God is sovereign in the intervention in human affairs. He could command that the natural laws are suspended. He could command the wind to stop. He could command the sun to stay in place, and he could command the animals, and he knew them all. That God knows the sparrows, that without his will it would not fall. And God in his sovereignty would also come into our lives in response to our prayer. And that's God's sovereignty. So we recognize both in its historical, on its macro sense, we also recognize that God is also in dealing with the micro sense and in our personal lives. But also there's one more thing that is of very much confusion to us, is that God allows Satan and demons to play a role in the human affairs and in the affairs of this world. And as we see that the demons was mentioned in Genesis chapter 3. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast in the field which the Lord God has made, and that was Satan. And so the role of the Satan and all his demons is somewhat of a mystery to us. In 1 Peter 5:8-9, that says, "Be sober and vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walk about, seeking whom he may devour." When Jesus was betrayed, and he said, "When I was daily with you in the temple, you stretched forth no hands against me, but this is your hour and the hour power of darkness." So it is indeed a reality that the Satan and the demons are active in this world, and God allows it. Now, then the next question is that why would God allows it? There are different theories, but let me just give you a very simple answer that I can think of. Where we are is determined by where we are going. In other words, if you are going to heaven, this world, this present world, is probably as close to hell as ever will be. Because after this world, you won't see that mess, you don't see that sinfulness in heaven anymore. On the other hand, if you are going to hell, this world is as close to heaven as ever. That means that you are not going to see such a happy place, a place where you could enjoy love and kindness as you would ever be. Now, I somehow believe that God allows Satan to be present and active in this world is to warn us that if we do not have assurance to go to heaven, as stated in the Revelations chapter 20 and 21, that one day that we are going to be thrown into the lake of fire, because Satan and all his demons would be also thrown into the pit of hell. So let's be warned. God is sovereign, but in his sovereignty, he allows the natural laws to function. The law of gravity allows the airplane to fly. It allows of a lot of things that's going on in our lives, but it also allows that a person who jumps from the tall building will probably die as he hits the ground. Now, is God wise in his device of his plan, his economy? I believe he is. And the scriptures in Romans talk about he's the only wise God, that he's a God that's full of wisdom. Maybe in his calculation that there will be some unfortunate things that could happen to humanity, that freedom for the angels could cause them to become Satan and the demons. Freedom of humanity would cause them to have the potentiality to sin, and actually they do sins, and they have the original sin. But there is a far greater benefit in his economy and his scheme. It is in his provision of freedom, that these humans could love him full-heartedly, voluntarily, without compulsion. As I mentioned last time, God did not create a perfect world. He created a very good creation of the physical material world, but it was not perfect. Why? Because in his wisdom, he wanted what we go through in history, in the physical material realm, that we will one day arrive at the perfect realm where there's no sin, no pain, no suffering, and no tears. So while we are in this world, facing pandemic, facing threats of our lives, facing difficulties, what should we do? Let me suggest 3 responses. The first one is from the example of Job. Job says, "Naked I came, naked shall I return. The Lord gave, the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." That is a surrender. In other words, that we know that God is far greater than us, that his economy is far vast and far more comprehensive than us, that God is eternal. While we are temporal, we can only look at the things on our own horizon. God is dealing with a reality that is all real, while we humans are dealing with a lot of superficial things. God is dealing with absolute things, while we are dealing with relative things. God has full, comprehensive and total control and sovereignty, yet he gave a relative freedom and relative rule to even Satan. Satan has a limited access to God, and Satan has a limited and temporal rule over this world. And the other thing that I want to mention is that God is also a mystery that we will never understand with our limited mind. And therefore, Paul wants us to come to have a deeper knowledge of his mystery, in which are the treasures of wisdom and all knowledge. And when we surrender, then we acknowledge God is far wiser than us, that his ways are higher than our ways, and his thoughts are higher than our thoughts. And the second thing is, Job was also, his response was to worship God. And he knew that God is compassionate and merciful. He also says that, shall we receive good only from God, and shall we not also accept evil? This is an attitude of surrender that leads him to worship. And the third one is patiently enduring evil. In 2 Timothy 2, verse 24 to 26, and the servant of the Lord must not strive, but be gentle unto all men, apt to teach, patient, and enduring the evil. So let us take heart to know that our God is a sovereign God, that He is controlled from Alpha to Omega, that at times that He could suspend the natural laws to come to our aid. But we should not fall into the different false teachings of, number one, the false teaching of deism that says that God after creation does not control the world. On the other hand, as another false teaching, the word faith movement that basically teaches that you could command to do whatever God wants, command God to do whatever you want Him to do. And we see that in the example of the church in Florida that defy the authority and says that, well, we are not afraid that we will catch the infection, and they continue to have the worship service, and then the police came and arrested the pastor. So that is a false teaching. And the other false teaching is atheistic materialism. There's no God, and therefore we just go around facing a natural disaster. We are people of faith, and hopefully if you are not, hopefully you could see the benefits of having faith, which is to recognize a sovereign God, full of mercy, full of wisdom, full of love. We cannot guarantee what He might do, because it's His sovereign will to do whatever He wants. We could, however, surrender, we could also worship, and we could also be patiently expecting a new heaven and new earth. Thank you.